Liberals say an election is near. Liberals also question on their fundraising campaigns. CBC an inconvenient truth for conservatives. The trade war escalates, and Canada caught between a rock and a hard place. And there's a 5-year anniversary. Find out all that more, and including the carbon tax likely getting renamed. Lots on the carbon tax today too. I'm Jim Check with Kelowna Now. I have with me Ian Burns, our managing editor, on the phone with me. And we're going to get right into it because we do have a really big show. Ready to go, Ian?
Well, I'm ready. Let's get it on.
A little cloudy here in Kelowna today. How is the weather out there in Ottawa on the other side of the country, this great nation of ours?
It's actually a lovely day. The birds are singing outside. It's mostly sunny, and it's going to be 10 degrees, I think, pretty soon. So, very nice.
So we're live on YouTube, live on TikTok, hopefully, and live on X, and on Facebook and Instagram. We're live on a bunch of platforms, so feel free to jump in there with questions, thoughts, all that kind of stuff. We'll try to respond to what we can, but as long as they're reasonable. And there you go. A federal election call is imminent. Public Works Minister Jean-Yves Duclos, I don't know if I got that right or not, yesterday told reporters leaders of all opposition parties said they were ready. The opposition parties have been very clear for weeks and months now. They decided they would bring this government down regardless of what we do. So Parliament set to resume March 24th, so likely there'll be a call for an election prior to that.
Yeah, I mean, he's just kind of stating the obvious, really, but it all does depend. We're very familiar with the sentence that I'm about to utter, but it all kind of depends on Jagmeet Singh, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In whose universe we've all basically been living for the last God knows how many years. Because if he decides that he wants to stretch this on for some, God knows what reason, but if he decides he wants to, then that's his decision. That's his prerogative. So, but I mean, I would expect that even he is not crazy enough to keep them in till October.
And I think probably Carney and them are looking at it and saying this is their opportune time too, because they have climbed in the polls, and this is their honeymoon phase. And I think, if the missteps he's made, I don't think him in government for the next 6-7 months is likely going to actually benefit him. So maybe
exactly, and he's not even an MP yet, and that's going to be embarrassing. He wants to change that as soon as possible. You need a by-election for that. I mean, there is one in April, but I'm not sure how much of a shoe-in that would be. I think he's kind of hinted that he wants to be an MP in Edmonton, which is like the city that he kind of says that he's from. So yeah, I do think he's going to go soon. And also, we don't know what's going to happen with Trump. Trump is the most important figure in this whole election. He's more important than Mark Carney. He's more important than Pierre Poilievre. What he does has the biggest impact on this election. And right now, Trump is in a ferociously anti-Canada mood. And the more of that Trump dishes out, the better it is for the Liberal Party and Mark Carney, as we've seen in the polls over the last month or two.
That seems to be playing into their hand for sure. The Liberal leadership race, this is another Liberal leadership race, raises questions about fundraising loopholes there. And you and I have questioned this too. How did Karina Gold and Chrystia Freeland raise the $350,000? And right now, only 2 of the candidates in the Liberal leadership race, Mark Carney and Ruby Dalla, who the one that they kicked out, disclosed their fundraising events to Elections Canada. I think they have about a month to report all this, but they're the only ones that have disclosed so far. Leadership candidates and political parties must disclose their fundraisers in advance if they meet certain conditions. If, for example, at least one person has to pay more than $200 to attend a fundraiser, and if they break that disclosure, they have to return that money. Fundraiser for Freeland held on February 10th, listed in Eventbrite, had a recommended donation amount of $500 to $1,750. There you go. So I'm sure somebody's going to be digging into that and seeing where. Because do you not find it surprising that Karina Gold was able to raise $350,000?
It's very surprising, but I mean, you'd require sponsorship in some form or another. Where even if it's just in the form of networking or whatever, you need and contacts. I think you need that, don't you, to realistically expect to raise that money. And she clearly has a sponsor somewhere within the Liberal Party that sees her, because she's quite young, that sees her as a future, bigwig in the party. So that's what I think must have happened. But when you read that, you just read that out in the story, how, they have to do it within a month, and then if they do break the rules, then they have to return the money. It's like, okay, big deal. That's not even a
Yeah.
big deal, especially if you're someone like Karina Gould or even Chrystia Freeland, who also hasn't reported funding. If you're, or Bayless as well, if you're one of these characters, they were also Rands, and they were from the very, very beginning. Everybody, I mean, within reason, everybody knew that they had no chance. So, in effect, if they have broken these rules and they're punished and the money has to be sent back, that's not much of a price to pay for all of that exposure, really, is it? All of that free airtime.
There was a media outlet that went through all the votes by riding, and it was really odd that in Freeland's riding and in Gould's riding, they couldn't even get muster 10% in their own ridings of the vote. And it seemed like the vote was basically the same across the board. Every riding, it was around 85, 88% for Mark Carney, and the rest of them getting, dribs and drabs, like 10s and 11s for votes, right? So
Yeah, I mean, it does again raise the question of why they actually went through with this, why they couldn't have just come up with an agreement behind the scenes so that Carney was the only candidate,
yeah, they could have
since
just
in
dropped out.
reality Carney
Yeah.
was the only candidate.
They could have just dropped out and ended it, right?
Exactly, and that would have been I think it's fair to say that would have been very much to the advantage of Canada and the Canadian people, because then we would have had Prime Minister Mark Carney settled in office months ago, and he would
Because
have been able to respond to these tariffs rather than waiting in the shadows, having to do debates or conversations or whatever they were, and having to go around and do fundraisers and these little speeches and things like that, while Trudeau, who we all knew was powerless and was about to leave, globetrotted and kind of wasted time. So it does raise a lot of questions.
And we all know that the candidates do their own polling. Like we see the polls that are, like the national polls and that, but the candidates do their own polls. So everybody knew what was going on and where they were
Well,
sitting.
Chrystia Freeland even said that. She said that afterwards. Chrystia Freeland was the only possible realistic competitor to Mark Carney, and then straight away after Carney was declared the winner, straight away she came out and said, "Yeah, well, I knew it was an uphill battle all along." It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay, so
yeah.
why did you drag us through the entire country through 2 months of a farcical non-election so that you could lose as you knew you were going to lose, while Canada's in full crisis mode, possibly the most intense crisis that the country's faced since the end of the Second World War, arguably.
And many people have said that this is one of the most selfish things that the Liberal Party has done, and it definitely only served them. It definitely didn't serve the interests of Canadians, and it actually played into their hands, right? I mean, the longer and the more ratcheting of this, this Trump trade war goes, it's shown that, and it has been a fundraiser for the Liberal Party as well. They've used it mainly as a fundraiser, and then all that
And a
350.
popularity raiser.
And all that 350, even Ruby Dalla's 350, they've put it all into the pockets of the the Liberal campaign for Mark Carney as the election starts to unfold here.
And he's really he's had millions, hasn't he? He got like $4.5 million, I think, recently, uh, donated to his campaign. Like, he's clearly going to attract a lot of big money. So it'll all but they're still like really, they're way behind the Conservatives, because obviously Pierre Poilievre has been miles ahead in the polls for like 18 months or so, and during that entire period the Conservatives have just been raking in huge amounts of cash. So I mean, they've got a long way to go, the Liberals. So I guess they will. Maybe, I mean, I don't know if that was one of the reasons why they had this drawn out, pointless election to try and get money, but I mean, it will have helped them, I think, to catch up a little bit. But they've still got so much work to do to match the Tories in the money department.
The CBC an inconvenient for rivals, and this story is a Hollydome Blacklock story. They said the CBC is politically inconvenient for the Conservative Party, said a senior Liberal MP. In a pre-election report to constituents depicting the CBC's $1.4 billion annual subsidy, which, Pascal St-Onge says they need to double as a campaign issue. This isn't about saving money. It's about silencing a public broadcaster. Poilievre sees it as politically inconvenient. But the network did cut 346 jobs last year while paying out $14.9 million in executive bonuses. There you go.
That is, a lot of things. We seem to be living through an era where your head is just exploding once every 3 minutes or something like that with the kind of things that you see. But that is so astonishing, isn't it? To think that they gave $15 million. They not only could they have kept those jobs in place, they probably could have even hired more people. But
Yeah.
they chose to give $15 million to executives for a corporation that I don't think even its most passionate defenders would say is firing on all cylinders lately.
Well,
I don't think anybody would say the CBC is doing really great lately.
I think somebody might explain it, a Liberal MP might explain it as those 346 definitely sacrificed for the greater good of the executives in making sure that they got their bonuses so they didn't leave to go somewhere else. So there you go. And meanwhile, Bill C-18 continues to crush independent media across Canada. It basically funds our competition while we get no funding, and then they're going to double the funding of the CBC. We're going to lose 3 more outlets here in Canada, Glacier Media Outlets in British Columbia, actually, Burnaby Now. I can't remember the names of the other two, but they're closing here in May, and that's close to 100 have closed since Bill C-18 was introduced, basically muzzling and crippling many independent media outlets, while CBC looks to be doubling its funding and maybe more bonuses in the works. Well, because they can't say, like, they say they need to do more with CBC. Well, why did you lay off 346 people and then take bonuses for that?
I suppose those executives are just so talented and so high quality that it's essential to keep them. I mean, just look at what they've achieved over the last 5 years. But I would say, sorry, just one last thing to add to the C-18 thing. If you ask the government, you ask the Liberal Party, why is this happening, Mr. Liberal Party? Could you explain to us? And they say it's because Meta is evil and they're doing all these nasty things and destroying democracy. And then, if like me, you're a curious kind of chap, you send an email off to the federal government and say, how much money have you spent on Meta lately? They'll tell you more than $1 million. So the evil Meta that's caused all this, that the Liberals are telling us is the bad guy, is also receiving money from the Liberal government. And
And just and
not the
we
Liberals' money, but our money.
And we did ask that question of Justin Trudeau when he visited the Okanagan, if he was going to get rid of Bill C-18 and allow media outlets, because we're the only country in the Western world that doesn't have news on social media. And the reason that they're advertising on social media is because they said that they recognize Canadians get their news on social media, so they need to spend that money to get their liberal platform out there. But media companies like ours, I guess, obviously don't qualify for that. But he said that they will never bow down to Meta. And sure enough, they're bowing down, I guess, because it's more important to get the Liberal message out there than to stand up for the principle which they enacted this Bill C-18 for.
Well, principles, eh? Principles are rather cheap, I think, in the world of politics.
So
Sadly.
just like the 346 that had to make the ultimate sacrifice, I imagine most media outlets across Canada that have seen their traffic halved and their revenues halved need to make the ultimate sacrifice so that the Liberal government can use this as a platform to double the funding for the CBC so that they can even get bigger bonuses and the rest of the media can be silenced. And it's easier to have one voice that's friendly to you than a bunch of multitude of voices that may be like us that are not necessarily that friendly to power.
Yeah, and then they get to maintain the very high standards that have been set over the last 10 years by the Liberal Party and the CBC. I mean, we're all living in paradise now, basically, aren't we? Thanks to their just unfathomably talented efforts. So I think we're the lucky ones, really, aren't we? And they need to do what they can to keep us lucky by staying in their positions.
If you listened to Jean Chrétien the other night, who was my political hero, um, we're in the best place ever. Canada is, and the Liberals have done an amazing bang-up job over the last 10 years. And the only reason Justin Trudeau left was that he needed that chair he walked out of the House with.
Yeah, I mean, Jean Chrétien, just like the rest of the senior members of the Liberal Party, they keep telling us about our the ratio of GDP to debt, the debt to GDP ratio. I mean, have you seen the debt to GDP ratio lately, Jim? I mean, are you being ungrateful here?
Apparently, most the businesses that are going under are being ungrateful as well. And again, back to the 346 CBC ex-employees are being ungrateful as well if they're looking to get their jobs back.
They just don't know how good they've got it, do they? They don't understand economics, obviously. Silly people.
Yeah, you know what? But social media, this is the one thing they can control very well, and they blocked Meta, and there's talk that they want to block X as well. And the liberals say that need because X threatens democracy, or the liberals, I guess, because the Tories beat liberals and NDP on online engagement, a study finds. So the people, are speaking, but we can't have, that. So that's why there's this. They put those feelers out there all the time, and the feeler is: should we ban X during an election because democracy is at threat? So Meta's already banned. Let's remember that. So then, if we only have one voice that is funded, then I guess then just the right information gets out there and no misinformation or no dissenting voices, and then nobody really wants to hold power accountable. That would be utopia.
I think that's I mean, it sounds almost like a conspiracy or something, but I guess it's increasingly becoming more and more plausible, isn't it? That, actions speak louder than words and all that. And the actions are, yeah, less and less choice, less and less diversity of media.
Well, I mean, if
And
you
ultimately, the consequence is that, yeah, the CBC, CTV, and Global have bigger, more consequential voices and get to put out a pretty sort of old-fashioned 2010s liberalism as their sort of political ideology.
pump up the tires, there was an even Parliament was prorogued because they had another bill that they were putting out there that would even censor the internet even more.
This study, by the way, from McGill, we should add, they say that even though they looked at YouTube and lots of other platforms, they say that the real reason that the Tories are doing better than the Liberals and the NDP is because of X and because Elon Musk went and fixed the algorithm so that it was biased. He made it so it was biased towards like conservative ideas. Um, that's their theory anyway. But I think X is pretty sort of in the grand scheme of social media. I mean, I'm not sure how big of a deal it really is. I think YouTube and Facebook are much more important, I feel. So I don't know how much I choose to believe that.
Well, I think that might be just fuel for like why it needs to be removed prior to the election. That might be just a little bit of like, they can use a study. They love using studies to say this is why we have to do this and that, right?
Indeed, and universities also are feeling a little bit trepidatious, perhaps, about the prospect of a Pierre Poilievre government. And besides that, academics, as well as students, if you care about what students think, but academics are extraordinarily liberal or left wing in their views and have been for decades now, to the extent that conservative academics are rather rare indeed.
Stock market not liking what's going on with these tariff. Big crash yesterday, like a big downward swing. Still off today. Some stuff is recovering, but I think Tesla had its biggest drop ever yesterday, and then the stock market was off. And we've seen like the last like month or so has been horrible for Tesla and horrible for the market in general. So Donald Trump talks about a golden age. Definitely not golden right now for the stock market. And after he won, the stock market really liked it. But these trade wars and this escalation definitely not looking good for the market because like now there's possible recession in the United States, almost a guarantee here in Canada, and definitely not good.
Well, he's done a lot of very, very stupid things, and it might make people think that that he's surprised by this, maybe that he's stupid enough to be surprised by this. But I don't think he will be surprised because I mean, even he must have known that tariffs were going to result in
He's a pretty sharp character,
very
so I
scared,
mean,
very frightened
yeah,
capital.
yeah, it doesn't take much.
So I think he's obvious he must have predicted this, or somebody in his entourage must have predicted this and told him, and I think he's decided that it's worth the cost.
Yeah.
But politically, it might be very bad. I mean, I feel like the honeymoon period might be coming to an end for Trump now, and he might start to experience some real opposition just within the country in general, but also all important within his own party. And we've seen Rand Paul, very influential, important figure within the Republican Party. He's already come out and said that, in so many words and politely, because he's a polite guy, he said tariffs are extraordinarily stupid and dumb, and obviously this has happened, and now people's lives, people's finances have been
Yeah.
wrecked by this stupid decision. I think more and more Republicans are going to come out and say that as Trump causes more damage to the American economy.
Yeah, even Ben Shapiro's come on and says, why are we putting tariffs on our Canadians? They're our partner and friend. And then I guess he's going to looking to do a podcast with Danielle Smith, which is causing an uproar here in Canada as well. Um, but
Yeah, the Canadian press did, and Canadian press, God bless them. They try, don't they? They give it a go, but because they try and present themselves as being like a neutral news agency. In reality, they're liberal with a small L, which often also means with a big L. But they wrote an article about it, Canadian press, about that Ben Shapiro thing, and it was just like a travesty of journalism, really, where they were just like, Ben Shapiro said homophobic, transphobic, and he also said he wants Canada to be part of the US, and they just totally ignored what he's been saying for the last few weeks,
yeah.
which is stop bullying Canada. It's a stupid idea. They just totally ignored that, obviously. But I mean, that's just Canadian press, who are a good laugh. If you ever want to have a giggle, read some
Well,
of their articles.
we do use their content for the website, but yeah.
But yeah, well, maybe we should put a massive disclaimer at the top, just saying, P.S. The people that write this are very lefty liberal, so
Well, talking about the Canadian
enjoy it
press,
with a pinch of salt.
they did do this article, which we have on kelownernow.com right now. Between two elephants, Canadian farmers feeling Chinese tariffs and worry about the U.S. So that is that where we tried to suck up to the Americans when Joe Biden was in power, when the Biden administration put that 100% tax on Chinese EVs, which are doing extremely well in the rest of the world. Um, China has now responded with tariffs on Canadian farm products, and um, prairie farmers say the planned Chinese retaliatory tariffs on Canadian agriculture are causing loads of uncertainty, while threats of U.S. levies and industry issues have created further problems, right? The president of the Agriculture Producers Association of Saskatchewan says China's 100% tariffs on canola oil, meal, and peas scheduled for next week are already being felt as markets have taken a hit, right? So there you go.
Indeed, and I think, it doesn't really matter what I or anybody else on the planet thinks about the Chinese Communist Party, because they do whatever they feel like doing. But I think that this is pretty foolish from the communists in China, because I feel like they could have sort of claimed the higher ground here and maybe made a lot of people in the Western world and in Canada think a little bit differently about China if they'd been wise, and
Um,
if they'd said, look, we're not going to hit you back. What we're going to do is try and kind of encourage you to get out of that abusive relationship that you're in with the United States. They could have done something like that, but like I've said before, the Chinese Communist Party, they are just pretty much hopeless at this kind of thing. They're so bad at international relations and trying to make friends and things like that. So they didn't do it. But as it happens, we're now in the worst of all worlds, really, where we're in a kind of trade war with the two largest economies in the world.
Yeah, almost 10% of the value of canola oil evaporated overnight. And, even in Canada and the United States with the health thing, a lot of people are trying to avoid seed oils and, the Chinese buying it. So I don't know. And then Beijing is also planning a 25% tariff on pork and aquatic products. So not good. And again, with all the tariffs being threatened, which we're going to get into here, by the Americans on our stuff there, not looking good for Canada, because those are the two economic mites in the world. China and the United States are the two biggest economies in the world. And for Canada to get squeezed out of both of those markets would be just a horrible situation for Canada.
Yeah, I mean, China is a massive force in certain markets, like mostly commodities, which is what we sort of specialize in. I think they are, by far and away the biggest pork consumers, for example. I think they're also the biggest oil consumers in terms of imports, because they don't really have any oil in China, so they have to bring it in from overseas. So it's like a lot of the things that would really want to sell. They are up there with the biggest importers in the world, and yeah, it's a terrible place to be. But I mean, it might have just been a little bit of bad news if the Americans hadn't stabbed us in the back. But obviously, with that American betrayal combined with China being China, it's a nightmare.
Doug Ford begging Danielle Smith, because that's the big card we have. That's our trump card. The Alberta Oil is begging Danielle Smith to put an export tax on Alberta oil flows to the United States because Doug Ford says he's going to put a 25% tax on electricity going to the United States. And here's Danielle Smith's response here on CTV with Fassi Kapelas.
Back our response, even if it holds back one of our biggest pieces of leverage?
Bashi, there's no circumstance under which I would agree to another tax on Alberta that takes $40 billion out of Alberta. You can ask me as much as you like. The answer is no.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Thanks very much, Premier.
Thank you.
There is Danielle Smith and says, let me be clear, right? So, and she's also saying that it's not an option and not going to do to something that will cost hundreds of thousands of Albertan jobs. And she said also putting tariffs on Ontario auto parts would also be a bad idea. That's from her X account there. You can go check that out yourself on Danielle Smith. You can find her on X. So there you go. That's one of the biggest exports we have to the United States is Alberta energy.
That will be music to President Trump's ears. I'm sure he'll be absolutely delighted about that, or at least his servants will, the ones that watch these interviews, because obviously what Vasi Capella says there is true. It is the biggest leverage that we have over the US, and Danielle Smith doesn't want to play ball because, as we've mentioned many times in the past, Alberta has been given a very rough deal by particularly the Liberal government that's in power now, and I mean you struggle to blame the Albertans, and particularly Danielle Smith there, for refusing to play along now. Now that Alberta is useful and necessary to the Liberal Party, they want to cash in on it, and you can't really blame a lot of people in Alberta for saying no, thank you. We're going to play our own game now because you've abused that trust that we had.
Stephen Jabot and the Liberals have definitely targeted Alberta and its energy over the past 10 years. And even Karina Gold, one of the Liberal leadership candidates, had a tweet out there from the past that says we need to figure out how to landlock Alberta's energy, basically destroy their industry. That's what that tweet means. We need to figure out how to destroy Alberta energy. So, you know, you're right. Like, why,
Yeah.
you know, all of a sudden now you're saying, Alberta, let's play nice. And, you know, and still, I mean, I think we'll get to it in a bit here. Climate change is still the #1 policy, I think, for the new Liberal government under Mark Carney. So we'll get to that in a bit here. But we do have Premier David Eby there making some threats as well, saying he's going to charge trucks going to Alaska. And we haven't seen a reaction from this. I haven't yet, anyway, on social media from Donald Trump. But we'll play a small clip here from David Eby.
Hey, everybody. We ready to go? Great. Good morning. Good to see everybody. Thanks for joining us here at BC Liquor Store in Victoria, British Columbia. It was about a week ago we announced taking liquor products and other products made in Republican states off of the shelf here at the liquor store and at all of our public liquor stores across the province. Since then, we have seen a threat of additional tariffs on the dairy industry, an investigation into our lumber industry by the president with the aim of adding even more tariffs, and disturbing articles in the New York Times and other places about the president threatening to redraw our borders and pursue Canadian water. Now, the reaction of many British Columbians, myself included, is if the president's so interested in Canadian water, then we're going to help him out by letting him keep his watery beer. I'm here to announce today that we are removing the rest of the American liquor products from the shelves of the BC liquor stores. That's wine.
There you go. And later on in that clip, he talks about how he's going to put a charge on trucks going into Alaska. as well as pulling all American liquor from the shelves.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure going to be on Canadian wine. I'm sure Wayne Gretzky's over the moon because he's got quite a lot of wineries, hasn't he? But that's going to be a huge demand for Canadian wine.
I'm
And
still
then
waiting.
obviously we also have to wait and see what the Alaskans are going to say and all the rest of the people that are
I,
going to be affected by this potential toll.
I think that is one of the more dangerous things that is being said, is putting a surcharge on traffic going into Canada from the U.S. And then imagine if they retaliate with that one, because we export more to the U.S. than we import. I mean, that would definitely, if that retaliates, that's just going to drive the Canadian consumer into the ditch in a hurry.
Yeah, and I mean you have to say it though. This is Trump's legacy, isn't it? This is the consequences of Donald Trump's decisions, and you might question the response, but the people like David Eby and Doug Ford and all the rest of them, they would never have asked for this kind of thing in a million years. They're just reacting, aren't they? They're reacting to something done by an individual, and it really is an individual. Like barely anybody, even in his own like cult, the Donald Trump cult, not very many people really care about Canada. It's just such a confusing moment in history where he isn't exactly, this isn't a ground up, you know? It's not a bottom up demand, like get the Canadians. It's just something in this one man's head. And now here we are talking about tolls on people trying to get to Alaska. It's just, it's really kind of getting out of control now.
So this is no longer just like tariffs. This is an actual full-blown trade war, because it's escalating, just like, it's like volleys, right? It's like volleys being shot back and forth. Trump responding to Doug Ford's 25% tariff on electricity going into the United States. Trump says he's going to impose a 50% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum in response to the electricity surcharge. And
Which is the end, pretty much, of the steel and aluminium industry, I'd say, which is very bad news for Quebec in particular.
And then now there's even more impetuous to build a pipeline, because what are we going to do with all the aluminum and steel that we kind of create? So, but like we still have a government that is in Quebec reluctant, and probably the Liberals reluctant to build any pipelines to get Alberta energy to the coastline. So, but what are they going to do?
Well, the leader of the bloc, I think it was just yesterday, came out and said something that, again, talk about these things that make your head explode. He came out yesterday and he was like, no, we don't really want a pipeline. We spent, because the Canadian government had to buy the TMX, the expansion of the Trans Mountain. He said, so he obviously, in his little head, he did a little calculation, and he said, we spent, I think he said 8 billion or $7 or $8 billion to buy that pipeline, and then none of that money came back to Quebec. I mean, why would we do this? And I didn't realize this. I don't know about you, but I didn't actually know this. But in Quebec, there's like this gigantic misinformation bubble. It's like conspiracy theories abound in Quebec, and we talk about post-truth. In Quebec, they don't even know that they benefit from equalization payments, a lot of them, because they don't really talk about it. It's not a subject that the politicians discuss there, because it's humiliating for Quebec that Quebec is propped up by the rest of Canada. So when he says things like that, which are just obviously like laughably false and stupid, the people in Quebec, particularly the ones that support him, are like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Why did we give them that money? When are they going to give us money? Because they're so misinformed. The
How
average
can
voter there, they don't even know that they're supported by Alberta equalization payments.
How can that be true, Ian, if CBC is one of the primary voices out there in Quebec, and they get a lot of that money, that CBC should have them well informed of what's going on, wouldn't they?
You would think so, wouldn't you? And why also, when the leader of the Conservative Party, who's all about pipelines and whatnot, speaks excellent French, we hear. He even
Yeah.
has a French name, an immaculately French name, raised by Quebecers, wasn't he, in Calgary? Why is it that he never mentions equalization payments either? He never talks about what a disgrace it is to the people of Quebec that they have to live basically as beggars to Alberta. Why does he never say that? Maybe it's because he wants to win a couple of dozen seats in Quebec so that he can be in
Well,
power.
to
But it's
be
all of these compromises that are made, and they all seem to converge on Quebec. I mean, later on in this story that we're looking at here about the 50% tariffs, Trump again mentions the quotas on dairy products, which is just again Quebec. It's all about making compromises to preserve Quebec.
Yeah, it's the next slide there in Rommel. But yeah, so the other thing is Pierre Poilievre doesn't get a lot of airtime on CBC, though, so that might be part of the problem that's not getting out there as well.
But I mean, when he gets the chance, he doesn't talk about equalization because he doesn't want to upset people in Quebec. He wants to win seats in Quebec.
And then Trump said Canada must immediately drop the anti-American tariffs on various U.S. dairy products as well, and that's what you were talking about, right? And he says if other long-time tariffs are not likewise dropped by Canada, he will substantially increase on April 2nd the tariffs on cars coming into the U.S., which will essentially permanently shut down the automobile manufacturing business in Canada.
I mean, it would also really hurt, obviously, America's auto industry as well. I mean, it's because they're so linked together. So, I mean, it's one of those things where if he wants to blow up our house, he is going to have to blow up at least half of his own house. And he's trying to give the impression that he's willing to do that. But I don't know. I mean, a couple of the tweets that he did, we've got one of them here, which I'm sure Rommel will probably show us. But he sent out a couple of truth socials about Canada, and I don't know. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, or if I'm barking up the wrong tree in your opinion, but he comes across very, very weak and scared, and he comes across as a very small man that doesn't really know what he's doing and that he's frightened because the way that he's speaking, like especially the other one, not this one, but the other one, he was like, Canada put this extra surcharge on electricity. You're not even allowed to do that. It's like, what are you talking about, you fool? You're not allowed to do anything that you do in a civilized world. It's because of you, because you don't do things that you're allowed to do. That's why you're getting this reaction. But it just makes him seem a little bit pathetic. I don't know. It's kind of it's a new perspective on Trump, I think, has been offered by these tweets.
That last sentence there, they will pay a financial price for this so big. I mean, he likes to use that type of terminology all the time that we'll read about in history books for years to come.
But I mean, again, it's just like this man. I feel the people that I feel most sorry for, I think, in this whole, other than Canada, is just like, collateral damage to his lunacy. But some of the people that I feel most sorry for in America are people who spent decades, and it's no exaggeration to say decades, trying to push certain conservative policies that Trump has attached himself to. And they think, thank God, we finally got this voice now who's going to do lots of things, like with the Department of Education and so on. Things that people have been arguing for since like the Ronald Reagan era, like really old timers. And then he's been elected and he's gone ahead and discredited all of these ideas. And he's almost like he's made people feel stupid by association with him because he's chosen to declare the most brain dead trade war in the history of the world against Canada. So all these people are sat there and they're like, for God's sake, like, I spent 40 years pushing this one policy objective. Somebody finally gets elected that supports it, and he turns out to be a gigantic imbecile and then makes us all look stupid for being associated with him. So like, and I would also say people, and I sort of include Rand Paul a bit in that, like keep an eye on people like Rand Paul. They sort of like made an alliance with Trump out of necessity, but I think they're the canaries in the coal mine, and they're starting to feel really embarrassed by him already 7 weeks in. So keep an eye on people like that. I think you're going to see a lot of holes blown in the Trump coalition in the coming months.
I do want to add, though, that the auto manufacturing business is not only at risk from the tariffs going back and forth, but also at a huge risk to the EV mandates because the Americans have dropped the EV mandates. And if we don't drop them here in Canada, we will lose the auto industry in any case, because they will go south back where they don't have the EV mandates. And it's already been, Stellantis has already said that. So it's like a double threat for the auto industry if we want to keep any of it. And Canada's auto industry is really, doesn't even amount to 2% of the world's auto industry. It's big for us, but it's small to the world. China now the leading auto manufacturer, and they've been blocked out of Canada with those 100% tariffs. and the United States, the second largest ones. And even, like if you look at the Europeans, there's tariffs back and forth on European autos too, right? So
Yeah, and then the other thing is energy. The reason that we're even having a conversation about Canada's auto industry is because we have competitive energy prices,
yeah.
very, very low by global standards. But obviously, net zero and things like that, a lot of these kind of extremist ideas, they make energy more expensive, obviously. So that would also kill the auto industry if it was ever implemented.
The one big truth for Canada, and everybody should remember this, our number one resource that Canada has that nobody else has is energy. It's energy. It's all about energy. And definitely if we have another 10 years of suppression of that energy, we're going to end up in a worse spot than we are. But if we play our energy to the utmost, we could become as rich as a country as Norway, where they have a sovereign wealth fund of over 300,000 per capita, and also have some of the cleanest, use of EVs, almost at 100% EVs. But all off the backs of oil and gas. So,
yeah, well, and also hydro contributes a bit to the Ontario, and obviously nuclear.
yeah.
But I mean, they're fixed pretty much. It takes a very long time to build a nuclear power plant, and no dams are getting made anytime soon, I don't think, and they take ages, even if you do want one. So they're pretty much fixed. So if you want to expand your energy capacity to make it more efficient or cheaper or what have you, to compete with the likes of the United States, it's going to be gas pretty much, isn't it? And I mean,
We
that's
could
because you can build those out really quickly. It's
we
not
could
going to
put it.
be wind turbines, I don't think.
Well, again, like I did a really good analogy on my LinkedIn there, talking about if we look at Canada as a hockey team, we've benched our superstars. We've benched our Lemieux and Gretzky's, and which are energy, oil and gas, LNG, and all that stuff. We benched all these superstars, and instead we're playing wind and solar, which I believe are good minor league teams, and one day they may become the superstars of Canada. But right now they are definitely minor league players. It's because of the amount of energy that they can supply. But we're playing them at the expense of benching our greatest assets.
Yeah, the people that carry the team.
Yeah. Anyway, Greenland is having an election, and they say, The Guardian, your old favorite, right? The Guardian has said that it could be the most consequential in the island's history. That's The Guardian from the UK. And our friend Ian here used to write for the Daily Mail. There you go.
Yeah, I've actually had a couple of things published in the Guardian as well. But when I was a young gun, I was, bordering on a communist when I was a very young person. And the Guardian isn't communist, but it is like on the very extreme end of liberalism. It's quite sort of, it's good for a laugh, but that's pretty out of tune with reality. But I mean, they also do have stuff like this. I'm not saying that this is out of tune with reality, because they do, similar to the New York Times, they also have some like serious reporters as well who just do normal news reporting, and that's what this is. But yeah, about Greenland, it's a funny one. I mean, the majority of the population of Greenland and the majority of the political parties in the election today want independence. They want to be independent from Denmark,
Yeah.
which has been in control of it for several centuries. But obviously, the US under Donald Trump, and this is something that predates Donald Trump's presidency anyway, just like a lot of his ideas are actually not his originally. But yeah, the US wants Greenland, wants to acquire it and make it a territory in the United States. I would imagine it'd be a territory. It's not going to be a state, I don't think. And then there's a conversation going on in Greenland where they're like, "Oh yeah, we're not going to be part of Denmark, but we're definitely not going to be part of America either." And I'm just kind of thinking, I read that and I just think like, what are you going to do about it? Like, you've got 50,000 people. Like, the most sophisticated weaponry that they have is a harpoon. I mean, what the hell are you going to do about it? It's just kind of. I'm sorry to say this because obviously I'm not trying to like mock the Greenlanders or anything like that, but I just feel like we're in a different era now. We're not in an era where the UN makes any difference or means anything. It's like we're in an era of, are you powerful or not? And America is very, very powerful. Greenland is very, very weak. So if the Americans have their eyes on Greenland, then it's going to happen. They're going to have it. There's nothing they can do about it.
I would also like to add that the North and the Arctic is likely one of the most important pieces in the modern world right now for a couple of reasons. And one is it could become the most economic passageway in the world for transferring goods. And two, it is very, very important from a military perspective. So that those two reasons make Greenland and North Canada so important in this world order.
Yeah, and packed full of minerals as well. A lot of the minerals that we need desperately now, and the Americans need quite desperately because China has a near monopoly on a lot of the rare earths and that kind of thing, particularly the way they refine them.
And even from the weather perspective, the coldness definitely makes, like Greenlands and North and the Arctic here very conducive to AI, where you need to put up these massive computer data centers that generate a ton of heat, and you could have less energy wasted in cooling if you just open the doors. So our north is so important, especially with an unfriendly Russia, because Russia, that is our largest really unprotected border is with the Russians is in the north here, right? And right now protecting
and in a sense,
is NORAD.
Sorry, go ahead.
NORAD is basically staffed by the Americans. Canada doesn't really contribute much to NORAD.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in a sense, because of what you just said, Canada's military being so small and ineffective or inadequate, it's also that the North, also the US's most vulnerable border in a way, if you think about it abstractly a little bit, because not only Russia, but obviously Russia's bedfellow, Russia's best friend in the world is China. Russia's not really a competitor to the United States. It's far too small and dysfunctional and poor. But China is a competitor to the United States. And China has, is sort of slowly turning Russia into a vassal. And China's also said that it's called itself a near Arctic state, which is just complete nonsense. But China's a powerful country. The Arctic's important. So it's invented a reason to make the Arctic its business. So if you think about it from the American perspective, if you've got Greenland there, like if Greenland's independent, I mean, I say that with speech marks because that's just a laughable notion. But if Denmark's independent and Canada is also independent and has a tiny military, then the Americans are going to look to the north there as their number one security concern, really, aren't they? Because then they're going to feel really exposed. And great powers like America, or even a great power like China as well, they don't play by the normal rules. They don't see something like Greenland and just think, oh yeah, like democracy and the will of the people. They don't look at it that way. They look at it in their own interests, and they see a vulnerability and they start to get scared, and then they'll just take it. That's what they'll do. And there are many examples of the United States having done this in the past. They've acquired quite a lot of territory in the past, including like most of the country that you now see on the map, but also places like Puerto Rico and Guam and Hawaii and so on. They acquire these places because they're strategically important and they need to have them in their mind. And the British did things like this when the British took like Malta, for example, for the sake of the Royal Navy and to control the Mediterranean. Like this always happens, and it's going to happen again. I think. I think I would put a bet on Greenland becoming part of the US actually in the next sort of like 4 decades or so.
Yeah, again, the north is so important from an economic sense. That northern passageway would become the most economic passageway in the world, far beating the Suez and the Panama Canal, just because at the top of the globe, it's a short distance to go, and it's all through water or ice, and you have nuclear icebreakers and nuclear ships. I mean, that thing is, even a usable passage right now, so.
Yeah, and very important places like Ontario or Manitoba. If you look at a map, you'll see how valuable that would be to Canada, to the interior provinces.
I mean, we could live off the tax revenues from an Arctic passageway without having to do anything else if that actually opened up. I mean, that's what we should focus our energy on. Brett, our longtime listener or viewer, says, why don't we build our own vehicles? We did once. It was called the Bricklin, right? It was John DeLorean made the Bricklin. A long time ago in Newfoundland. Very futuristic looking car, right? Would have made Elon Musk proud, like that car has been used in Back to the Future, another great Canadian actor in there, Michael J. Fox, right? Star of that show. There you go.
Yeah, where's he? Where's he coming out cheering for Canada? We need him to get
Uh,
out there.
you know, Michael J. Fox has Parkinson's, and I don't think he's much in the media right now. But
I think he's still, he's still like
yeah,
he's
still
still out and
active out
about,
there.
isn't he?
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
not exactly chair bound or anything.
yeah. No, he's still quite vocal in that. The big anniversary is today. Can you guess what that big anniversary is? Oh, there we go. 5 years ago, the nightmare, right? 5
Yeah.
years ago now. This is, like that. Remember that day is still very, like, when the NBA canceled the season, NHL canceled, and just all that started happening. Just, and it just was just like, and then it was a few years of just turmoil.
Yeah, and it was funny to look back now, but I remember like Theresa Tam, I think she was still back then. She was the federal health authority, wasn't she, that figure or whatever? And then Bonnie Henry. I can remember them coming out and saying like, nah, we don't need to worry about this. Not in Canada. Like this is just something that's happening over there. And it was like I can remember wondering why they were so confident about that. And then obviously disaster was just around the corner, wasn't it?
Yep. Anyway, people all have their stories, and if you want to share them in the comments, go ahead. Of COVID. Some good things happen out of it too. Like, like in British Columbia, you can get your insurance renewed now without actually having to set foot in an insurance office. You'd think that would have happened before that, but like I said, there was some good stuff that came from there, right?
Yeah, a few little things.
Yeah. There you go. And then Doge, this is CNN talking about these Doge cuts in the States. There's lots of talk in Canada that people want Doge. There's obviously a lot of Elon Musk taking a lot of hate for it too. And, people shooting up dealerships and lighting vehicles on fire and stuff like that. But I'm going to play this clip here from CNN.
About when we're talking about the cuts that Doge is bringing about. How are they feeling about
Yeah, this to me was one of the more shocking figures that I saw. Made me go, wait a minute, hold on one second. Whoa! Americans on Trump and Joe's efforts. Musk and Doge should influence government spending and operations. Look at this. 54%. The majority say that he and they should. How about approve of Trump trying to cut staff at government agencies? Again, you get a majority here. 51%. So yeah, Elon Musk might not be that popular, but these cuts and the idea of spending cuts, at least within the federal government and cutting at government agencies, that actually has majority support. I was truly surprised by this, Kate, but the numbers are the numbers.
Well, there is a view that cuts across Democrat and Republican of people thinking that Washington is too big, bloated federal government, waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, those are drain the swamp is what people.
Maybe all this trade war rhetoric is to cover up for what Doge is doing so that they get less.
And we're joined by.
Oh, that's okay. That was Rommel there. Anyway.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I was struck there, I just have to mention it, by just how shouty Americans are. They love a shout, don't they? That guy was just bananas with his shouting. But he was also like saying, the numbers are the numbers. It's like, no, you're looking at one poll. Like, shut up. For God's sake.
That's this guy's only job. He does all kinds of polls, and he's very animated all the time. I watch him quite a bit, so he likes to be animated. That's how he gets on. He gets more airtime every time. And then the host plays the role of being shocked every time. So there you go.
But yeah, I mean, he's on about one poll. One poll doesn't tell you much about anything, really, as he should know if that's his job. But I would say, in general, the general principle, yeah, is popular, isn't it? Like saving money, particularly the federal government. I mean, Americans are very well aware of how indebted they are. They have an enormous national debt, absolutely tragic, which they've been going on about for 25 years at least, or more. How like huge that debt is. And nothing ever seems to be done about it. So I can imagine it's very popular.
Even the Biden administration said when it was in power that there was at least $500 billion worth of fraud, waste, and abuse in the American payment system. Alex Karp was on CNBC as well, saying that with the advent of AI, it's very easy to get transparency. That we can see where every dollar is being spent. And that's why Elon Musk is the man for this job. I mean, people say, like, why him? It's because he's using AI to sift through these documents, right? Because you couldn't do it. I mean, I was an auditor in the past. You couldn't do it at any scale, because you just get roadblock after roadblock, whereas AI just digs in and just pulls out all these things and asks questions, and it just works like that. It just kind of like brings stuff to light in seconds. And Alex Karp says that's what's being used as AI. It's not Elon Musk doing the work either. It's 100 of these basically data scientists, young kids that are actually using AI to kind of sift through these documents. And something that many Canadians have been asking for as well. And one of the reasons we prorogue government here in Canada is because they wouldn't release documents on the 200 million plus spent in this green slush fund. I mean, AI could definitely show you where all the money went. Who doesn't want more transparency on government funds, which are your funds? Shouldn't we all know where that money is being spent?
Yeah. Who indeed? Who wouldn't want that? And what might their motivations be? I don't think they'd be wholesome motivations.
Hey, who argues against it? Like, who says, well, hey, we don't want the government to kind of tell us where they're spending our tax dollars. We just like it to be a secretive, and that, like some of the MPs become multi-millionaires during, off a salary of $150,000 a year. They become like these very, very rich people. And these contracts, are going to people that are connected. We've seen it with the Liberal Party. How many contracts went to non-arm's length people?
Yeah, a good few scandals in that department. But as far as I'm aware, the Liberal Party they could never really think of an excuse or a defense of, the blocking of those documents. They didn't even try, as far as I'm aware. All they did instead was say, look at the Conservatives, look what they're doing. They're blocking Parliament because the Conservatives filibustered, didn't they? Which is just like, they just basically refused to cooperate in Parliament and made it impossible to do anything in Parliament.
Well,
So the Liberals just concentrated on that. They didn't say, oh, we need to conceal these documents for this reason. I don't think they ever did.
Well, the same thing's going on in the United States. They won't talk about the cuts. What they'll talk about is they'll make up stories and say that, it has to do with Elon Musk stealing the money. Like, why would the richest man in the world need to steal anybody's money?
Well, he might do soon if Tesla stock keeps tanking.
But the reality is, like, we should know where the money is being spent. It should be transparent. And don't forget, the Liberals under Trudeau ran under accountability and transparency because they said Stephen Harper didn't have that. And they're the furthest thing from accountable and transparent.
Well, that includes the new leader who's refused to disclose his finances.
even I put it on my LinkedIn. He was even mocking full disclosure. He did a thing in his Liberal acceptance speech there when he talked about full disclosure. Like Pierre Poilievre keeps focusing on full disclosure. So they're actually making a mockery out of full disclosure. And shouldn't we have full disclosure?
You would think so, wouldn't you? You'd think he would have voluntarily offered up his own finances to be scrutinized in the way that they are when you become an MP. You would think he would do that, wouldn't you? Just to try and say, like, I know I'm not an MP. I know nobody's actually voted for me yet in a democratic election, but because I'm the Prime Minister, or about to be, I'm just going to go above and beyond. I'm just going to reveal this just to put you all at ease, kind of thing. But yeah, you thought better of that.
Well, let's move on to British Columbia and the mess we got going on here. Kent was out there talking to the Lake Country Mayor, and this is about concerns about after MLA Tara Armstrong left the BC Conservative Party. Here, we got a small clip here from less than a minute here.
LA, Tara Armstrong. What was your reaction when you heard that she had left the Conservative Party?
Well, I was certainly quite surprised. I didn't find out till late Friday night what had happened. We're all still kind of waiting to see what the actual real things that led up to it were. We've heard part of the story, but I'd like to hear the rest of it. I'd like to actually know. But yeah, we were really surprised and a little bit frustrated in terms of, all these different parties doing what they're doing. This is all a distraction. We've got a lot of problems right now. Yeah. From a municipal standpoint, from a Lake Country standpoint, we're a rapidly growing community. We need all sorts of provincial help. We need assistance with roads. We need water.
Excuse me. There you go. So 3 BC Conservative MLAs have now stepped down from the Conservative Party and are gonna, they're gonna work independently. And that is Dallas Brody, that started this when she was removed from the party, Jordan Keeley and Tara Armstrong, and said they would sit together as independents and maybe even explore the launch of a new political party. David Eby must be loving this because, you know, like there's even talk during this election that the BC United Party would get reborn. I don't think these three would be part of the BC United Party, but yeah, so lots of splintering in the conservative side of the ledger for British Columbia.
Well, you know, talk about BC United, Renee Merrifield and Ken Falcon and lots of other people did warn the BC Conservatives, didn't they? They did say you've got a lot of people on your candidate lists here who aren't really vetted properly, and then it's not gonna work out well. And I guess right now, Kevin Falcon, who seems to have disappeared into a black hole somewhere, he's probably managed to smile at this and feels like he's been vindicated in that area at least.
Well, we do have Renee Merrifield on at noon, so if you have any questions for Renee Merrifield, we'll be live with Renee Merrifield across all of our live stream channels. So if you have some questions for Renee Merrifield, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about the splintering of the BC Conservative Party. We'll cover that more. David Eby, though, comes out and says he will remove the consumer carbon tax as promised once that federal barrier is down, which is likely to be really soon. It sounds like they're going to pull the April 1 increase, and not sure what they'll do with the rest of it, though. The April 1 increases that, but we do have a clip here from Stephen Gibault. So let's play this clip.
Do you expect Carney to get rid of the consumer carbon tax before he calls an election?
Well, he said yesterday that he wanted to get rid of it. We're looking into how that could be done and how rapidly it can be done.
Do you expect this to happen, though, before the election is called?
As I said, we're looking into it. I don't have like a time to give you. We're looking into different options. Do we need to change legislation? Can we go the regulatory route? Like, what are the options? And I don't have an answer for you yet.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, I mean, he said that he wanted, for example, to work on the industrial carbon pricing system that gives us 3 times more emission reduction. So make sure that big polluters do their fair share when it comes to reducing emissions. And you should remember that our climate change plan doesn't rest on 1 or 2 measures. It's more than 100 measures that we've deployed.
Got any questions after listening to that clip?
I've always got questions whenever Guilbeault says anything, really. But he's always on the run, isn't he? He doesn't like to sit down for extended periods of scrutiny.
Like, he says that if they do the industrial carbon tax, which is just another way to, you know, like put carbon tax on something, that it would have 3 times the effect. So the question then is, like, so why were you punishing Canadians for the past few years with a consumer carbon tax if there was a more effective way to do it that didn't actually show up to the consumer, like right at the pump and at, you know, like their gas bills and everything for their home heating?
Yeah, indeed. That's one question that you might ask. I mean, another question that would be quite good to ask is who ultimately is going to pay for this this new tax or the modification to the carbon tax? It's my suspicion that it'll be the average Canadian. So
yeah,
it's going to end up being pretty much the same thing.
And he said he's going to mandate the banks back into this net zero alliance that he used to chair, and they all left. During the Mark Carney's acceptance speech there, you know, he said, basically announced that they were going to get rid of the consumer carbon tax, and also the capital gains tax in Canada. And the whole room cheered like wildly. This is all really strong liberals in the room. These are big liberal supporters. The only person not clapping was Justin Trudeau, because those are his 2 big pillars.
Yeah, those are his babies. And, you know, the reason that he's no longer in charge of the Liberal Party. So, I mean, he's trying to smile, wasn't he? I remember the camera zooming in on him. But yeah, he's probably a bit gutted, wasn't he?
He was probably just thinking about when he was going to grab that chair.
Yeah.
How was he going to get that chair out of there? Because he stuck his tongue out as he was taking that chair, too. We've seen that before a few times, too.
Yeah. Guilbeault, though, just to say something else about him, I just find his very presence in the government to be mysterious to me. I mean, can you imagine a Conservative government making the Minister for Climate Change somebody who had been arrested for going out and protesting with extremists to try and, I don't know, do something like shut down the Paris Climate Accords or something, something like that. So, some kind of like somebody that had been arrested for going out and trying to demonstrate to stop people at building wind turbines, let's say. And then that person was in command of climate change and renewable energy. It's like I find it odd that more people aren't concerned about that, because Gil Ball in his youth was an extremist who was arrested when he was associated with Greenpeace because of his hatred for fossil fuels, and now he's in charge basically of Canada's fossil fuel industry. It's kind of, is that not weird? Why do people not talk about that as much as I think they should?
Daniel Smith has asked for his resignation many a time with Justin Trudeau. But yeah, and it's I mean, it's still a big part of their pillar is climate change. So I'm not sure what will change if you just move it from one thing to the other. Again, Canada, number one asset is energy, and if we still have people like Stephen Gibault in charge of how we get energy to market, we're going to be in the same spot we are.
One thing that I'm very confident will not change is the overall CO2 emissions on Earth, because Canada is responsible for essentially none of them. It's India, China, the US, etc. But obviously he's not the minister for those countries, so instead we mess around doing nothing.
We have sent lots of Canadian tax dollars to other countries to help them with their climate change agenda, though. So there you go. Tom, switching to Kelowna. Tom Dias back in the chair after a health scare. He's back at work there, so that's great. Great news for the mayor. Welcome back.
And, pretty awful experience he seems to have had.
Yeah, and an unusual occurrence too. So we won't get into that. But he's back in the chair after that health scare. Definitely, when I spoke with him, that he said that it was a it definitely opens your eyes to what life's all about. So there you go. Let's move on to markets. Gold. Again, lots of market uncertainty. Where do people go? They like to go to gold, right? The safe haven asset, as they call it, right? The canary in the gold mine. And Bitcoin, again, suffering a bit. Again, I think there's again, you hear this talk about Bitcoin being made as a reserve asset for the American government, and also Texas now making noise about making it a reserve asset as well. So again, I say there's still a lot of wind in the sails of Bitcoin, and that's definitely some temporary setbacks. And then if you look at that chart there, you can see that that big spike up was the November 5th election, lots of euphoria, and then it kind of dies off. And then this trade war stuff is definitely really not good for markets. And I asked Donald Trump to take a serious look at what you're doing to the world and to the this golden age you're trying to build, while you're actually at the same time destroying valuable market cap across the world and causing a lot of turmoil, right? So maybe just ease up on Canada. How's that? Just as a nice ask, right? Just like ease up. But then again, if we think about
maybe even Mexico as well, we'll be generous and we'll bring them along.
And then Mexico definitely keeping their head down and just allowing Canada and the U.S. to fight it out, right? Mexico just like, just keep your head down, don't say anything, just let them volley at each other and let them go at their trade war, and we'll just be quiet here and hopefully that they run out of energy.
But I mean, the Mexicans as well, they're just waiting to see what happens. But I think if they are to be drawn into this in a big way, I think they will hit back. And Sheinbaum she's said a few things like, you can't disrespect Mexico and stuff like that. She needs to defend the dignity of Mexico as well. That's something, and she will, but she's just not taking part in the back and forth. That's the difference, isn't it?
There's a lot of chatter on our YouTube comments there about who initiated the carbon tax. I don't think that's the real question right now. The question is, what do we do from here? Because energy is our greatest asset. And is it our number one platform for leadership, or is energy our number one export that we need to figure out? I guess that's the real question.
Yeah, and also look at it in the context of what's happening now. We've got our backs to the wall. We're desperate. We're sort of fighting for our lives in a sense. And what
Yeah.
is it that our leaders are talking about? Energy, because that is our true power. Other
And
than
if
energy, we're not really much of anything, really. People don't really care what we do or say, but except for our energy. That's what matters.
And if we go back to the hockey analogy and you go on my LinkedIn, you can read that thing. It's got a picture of Gretzky and Lemieux there hugging at the game 3, and the game-winning goal. And then my thoughts on that is open the damn gate and let energy out the door.
That
How's
would
that?
probably be to our advantage, yeah.
Canadian dollar, Mark Carney named, and the dollar kind of like slipping maybe because they don't see Mark Carney as a pro-energy guy, or maybe because the tariff wars are seeming to be escalate, likely the latter in the tariff wars, but the Canadian dollar not liking that. And if we get tariffs and a falling dollar, that will really hurt the Canadian consumer. And especially if we have to lower interest rates, which I believe we're going to do. I think that Bank of Canada will cut at the next one because we definitely need to stoke some type of investment in Canada, and that's not happening right now.
That's tomorrow, I believe, isn't it, Bank of Canada? So that's one to watch.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. In AI tech world, there you go. AI can now take Zoom calls for you. So those people that have work at home jobs, you don't even have to show up for the Zoom call right now. You can create, and I've seen this done. One of our staff members is make your own kind of like avatar. And I know a CEO of a company that actually has avatars attend meetings for him. Not avatars, but actually, avatars. But they're so realistic. They talk in your voice and everything. And they can attend meetings for you. He uses, in this one CEO, he uses them for his even AGMs. So imagine that. Not only do you not have to, attend those really irritating Zoom calls that really interfere with your Netflix and all that stuff, you can actually have your avatar attend now.
That's good. And I suppose it also means that if you're a dictator, somebody like Vladimir Putin, you can quietly die somewhere in a closet and
Yeah,
still continue to rule Russia for the next 30 years.
there you go. All kinds of wins. There you go. And again, this is in our AI tech world. Sorry, this one is more in our EV section. Sorry, I just got put in the wrong section in our EV world. Elon Musk taking a ton of hate and, like I said, burning down Teslas and also like shooting up dealerships. I think there was one dealership that was shot up by somebody at 2 o'clock in the morning, and CNN has said that was basically a peaceful protest. I guess because it was done at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Or maybe because it was done against somebody associated with Donald Trump. That might also be a reason.
But there is a lot of Republicans out right now, including Donald Trump saying it, and including, I think, Sean Hannity, and then this is Grant Cardone's wife, and we'll just show you the other side of this. Go ahead and play this clip here.
Guys, I'm so excited. Look, it's my very own car. It's nice and clean. It has the clean car smell. Random advice, guys, keep your cars clean. I know some people who don't have very clean cars. That's not targeted.
You want to shout them out, call them out?
No, I won't do that. But I just mean to keep your cars clean. Take care of all your spaces. I'm very excited. Don't speed, guys. That's good. Actually, don't speed.
Yeah, so there you go. So a lot of people talking about buying Teslas and that in support of the work that Elon Musk is doing. He did an interview with Sean Hannity last night. You said you watched it too, Ian. Definitely, he's looking a little bit sad because of all the hatred for it, and it's actually really hurt the Tesla stock, and it's definitely a lot of people hating on Tesla, which is a brand that had so much love because it's done such good work in the world for you talk about climate change. Tesla is the leading car in that regard, and definitely taken on a lot of hate for what he's trying to do.
I don't think it's because of what he's trying to do necessarily. I think it's because he's becoming a bit sort of unhinged, isn't he? Referring to people as traitors and implying that people are pedophiles. I'm not talking about the Thai cave people. I'm talking about a more recent one there, and saying that the US should leave NATO, accusing people of corruption and accusing people of wanting to see people die in the likes of Ukraine. I mean, he's thrown an awful lot of bombs out of his window, and now I guess they're coming back. So, but this was always the risk with Elon, in terms of him as a CEO of a publicly listed company. It's always the risk because he's just so mouthy, isn't he? He just can't help himself, and you know, he's like an activist CEO, isn't he? And I guess that is like, it kind of comes with the territory that the stock will suffer if he goes off a cliff and starts saying mad things.
Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, he came out there. This is in our EV section. Proud to share that all 139,000, almost 140,000 complementary adapters reserved by our U.S. cousin have been shipped. So these are the adapters that allow Fords, the Mach-E and the Ford F-150 Lightning, to access the Tesla supercharger network, which most automakers now access, which is really, if you think about it, the largest, if you think of it as in comparison to a gas station, it's the largest gas station network now in the world.
Very interesting, yeah. Another feather in Elon Musk's cap.
Tesla is, for most people, Tesla is not really an auto manufacturing company. Tesla is really an energy company. Again, come back to this thing called energy. Energy, energy, energy. It's all about energy. Everything you do when you wake up in the morning, it's all about energy. Everything we do. Even right now, Ian and I are on this live stream, The Really Big Show, because of energy. Some really good news, though.
Even
What's that?
The people that want to insult us as well, that's all energy.
Yeah,
That's
they had
negative
to.
energy, but it's still energy.
They had to use energy to chuck barbs at us. There you go. Well, we do welcome them. We welcome them with
Oh, we
open
love a
arms.
good barb.
There you go. And speaking of that, well, just a couple of previews. I have reached out to Ruby Dalla, and her team got back to me and said that see if she can fit it in the schedule. So it would be interesting to have a chat with her. No?
I think it would be fascinating. Yeah, I mean, she's actually, considering her reputation as like a bit of a nutter, that's how the Liberals are trying to portray her. She's actually like very steady away in the media. She's actually probably one of the best media performers that were in the race, I would say.
And she's the queen of the meme, and we've got a meme from her at the end here, so stick around. Elon Musk used to be the king of the meme, but he's definitely more the king of disruption right now. He's like, if he was in a Star Trek movie, he'd be the disruptor, and you know, and a lot of people thinking not in the best way possible. But we got some good news here for you first. An Alberta man wins $30 million, and what does he say? Well, I used to live in Edmonton, the city of champions, when I lived there, and definitely there's the old joke was that there's two seasons in Alberta: winter and the 5 days in July that you call summer.
It's also funny because you got that, like, almost looks like it was done in Microsoft Paint there, where it's like Alberta wins again, and then the guy's like, I hate Alberta, I want to leave.
That's what his big slogan. He's like, what are you going to do? You know, like the old saying is, what are you going to do with all that money? And people usually say it like the Super Bowl. I'm going to Disneyland. He says, I want to get out of here. So that's it. I don't know if that's going to be. I don't know if that's going to be a great tourism ad for Edmonton, the city of champions. I loved Edmonton when I was there, and I think it's one of the greatest cities in Canada. Definitely one of the big box test stores, right? Because it's cheap land, cheap everything. Edmonton, one of the cheapest cities to live in. So, like, if you're looking for a cheap place to live that has lots of big box stores, Edmonton's your place, right? And again, like I said, the two seasons, right? Winter and those 5 days in July that you call summer.
It's sunny though, isn't it, Edmonton? Like compared to BC, I think it's probably sunnier than anywhere in BC overall, even if it is colder.
Somebody said it has snowed in Alberta in July. Yeah, I was there when it snowed in July, and I remember that the thing about Alberta the most time. I remember putting my Christmas lights on. You got to put them up in October, like the beginning of October, because Halloween most of the time was you had to put the kids' costume on top of the parka, right? Because there's no way that you're sending the kids out in the freezing cold, right? So there you go. Edmonton, the city of champions. I don't think they call it that anymore ever since Wayne Gretzky left. They even want to rename his road, which is definitely disturbing, like of all that he's done for the city of champions. So there you go. And then we have our meme. And here's our meme from our friend Ruby Dalla. Nothing. She's actually getting good at the memes, right? This is the Liberal Party telling her, stop running, stop fighting, and stop talking.
It could equally be that instead of having the Liberal Party on the left and Ruby on the right, you could have Donald Trump on the left and Canada on the right. It's just like classic bullying, and she is kind of being she has been bullied a little
She
bit, hasn't
definitely
she,
got
Ruby?
bullied there. I mean, again, if we take Justin Trudeau at his, I mean, people have played this clip over and over when he shamed America. This is, again, coming back to bite us in the butt. Shamed America by telling us like they missed an opportunity to elect a female. And here he had 3 females running in this race, and he did not come out in support of any one of them.
Well, he basically fired one of them, which triggered the election in the first place. And then, yeah, I don't think he said anything about Karina, really. She's just kind of on the periphery, isn't she? And then the other woman, yeah, well, he didn't, but his party kicked her out of the race.
Yeah. And Edmonton, somebody in the comments here says Edmonton first became famous because of a British rock band. I don't know this name. Do you know this? Procol Harum recorded an album with the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra in 1971. Do you know that band at all?
No, I don't know that band.
Well, you're a Brit, and this couldn't be that famous then, right? Famous British rock band? I don't know. But
might be a one-hit wonder band or something. There was a lot of them back in the day.
He says, when you hear the song Conquistador, there you go. I don't know. They had a beautiful facility there, the Edmonton Jubilee Theatre. I went and watched the Phantom of the Opera there, right? And I was there with my wife, and I was doing this in the middle of the performance, all these people with suits and ties on, and I was doing this, and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm changing the channel. I didn't hear the end of that one for a while. Because there's a lot of screaming going on there. I heard some screaming in the car as I was driving home, like never to embarrass her like that again either. So there you go. Yeah. Don't take me to a fancy event like that, right? I just definitely don't have the culture for that. My mother loved ballet, another one that I would do this to, right? But you know, like some people love it, right? My mother loved ballet and took our kids to it. I'm glad she did.
Swan Lake. I mean, you can't say no to Swan Lake, surely. That's a good ballet.
There you go. See, you and my mom could have went. There you go. So,
I mean, Swan Lake. I feel like the reason I mentioned Swan Lake is because I think that like transcends the genre, let's say, the medium, because it's so good. I think so. I would recommend that.
I think the best ballet I've ever seen. 1987 Canada Cup, the three-game series between Team Canada and Russia. So there you go. There's my ballet. Mario Lemieux, from a pass from Wayne Gretzky, scored the game-winning goal, one of the most memorable goals ever in Canadian history, the best ballet on ice. There you go. And that's our show for today. We do thank you for watching Kelowna Now. I'll be back at noon with Renee Merrifield in our Beyond the Ballot. Meaning will be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with more of The Really Big Show. Thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.